We've been in the industry where it's been the roller coaster. I think that's where you're going to really see when you don't know the numbers, you don't see what your staff is outbounding and inbounding, and that control is hard.
They're still not even paying attention because there's so many distractions. And, when COVID first hit and all of a sudden this surge came to vacation rental, it was all about win those displaced travelers because they're going to go back next year on the cruise. Because the travelers are out there spending money. They're just not coming in easy.
Attention, you are now listening to a fully loaded episode of Straight Fire VR. Take aim at the moving trends, target the evolving market, and do a deep dive on the data. Vacation rental professionals are in the business of making memories. We at Straight Fire VR make it our business to pass along the tips that can help those involved make bank and dodge the bullets of common pitfalls in the industry. Joining our firing squad today is a fixture on the hotel and lodging industry conference circuit for over 3 decades. Welcome, Doug Kennedy, president at Kennedy Training Networks Incorporated. Monitoring the crossfires, we have our own Miriam Ramsey, regional director of business development at B-Trips. And as always, our host Steve Milo has the topics ready at his side. So Steve, when you're ready, take fire.
Okay, hey, thank you, Heather. So, Doug, appreciate you being on. You have an extensive background. I was just looking at your website. You're doing reservation training, front desk hospitality training, vacation rental selling, which would be outbounding, but also hotel selling and hotel sales. So I'm just curious. My first question to you is, what can the vacation rental industry learn from the hotel industry?
Well, that's a really great question. To be truthful, I don't want to offend most of my hotel clients, which is right now about half our business, but it could probably go the opposite direction in many ways. Hotels could learn a lot from vacation rental industry, but I really feel like there's two paths in the hotel industry. The branded hotels are, I guess what vacation rental industry could do is learn from the mistakes of hotel industry, because hotel brands are thinking it's all about points and perks. Now, points and perks are nice, but what keeps them coming back is the people. I just finished my newest training article yesterday with that theme. So that teed me up for a really good question. You want to have the best tech, but you're not going to out-tech the competition. It's the people that make the difference. And as some sectors of lodging get that, that's why you see the explosion of boutique, independent, niche properties.
Well, it's interesting because I've seen among the branded hotels, probably one we talk about quite a bit, that they've cut back on staff, particularly on the front line and even on the back of the house. Sometimes cleaning is optional, or you have to go to the desk and demand it. So it's really interesting what they've done. Meanwhile, I don't know if you've noticed, Doug, rates in major cities have gone up dramatically on hotel rooms.
Absolutely.
So probably not the best idea to cut your service at the same time as you're jacking up your rates.
No, I quite frankly, I'm very disappointed and frustrated. I mean, you look at, we think of hotels, maybe you travel and you go to a lot of conferences and whatnot, and you think of, the luxury or the full service upscale, but the average mean hotel is 150, 250 room, Courtyard, Hampton, Holiday Inn Express. These hotels are staffed with one person. Just do the math on ADR times that number of rooms. Like, we can't afford another person. And then hotels complain, oh, no one wants to work here. Well, yeah, because you pay the same or less than Burger King, and how much would it take to have one more guest? Because that person is doing it all. They're taking calls for extra pillows, they're taking calls for, reconfirming. A lot of people still call. And it's really a shame. Now, again, not all operators are that way. The franchise operators, I would say about 20% get it.
Who do you think's the best operator?
Well,
can you say? I mean,
management companies. Oh, I'd be glad to talk about a few. McNeil Hotels, amazing. During COVID, when everyone else cut staff and laid them off, they kept them on, including their salespeople. And when business roared back, they're in a lot of secondary, tertiary markets. They had plenty of staff, and
Right.
those salespeople were around. There's plenty of others that are out there. I don't want to disrespect any of
Right.
the
No.
clients. But that's really who's running hotels. It's not the brands anymore, as far as most of them. Now there are brand managed hotels. And again, some of them are doing some things well. And we have a lot of Hilton luxury clients right now that are doing a fantastic job. But I think overall pound per pound, though, a lot of the franchise operators have cut staff, to Steve's point, too far.
Yeah, my experience, and I do use hotels as well as vacation rentals when I travel.
Yeah.
I found the best consistency among the Hyatt brand properties.
Doesn't surprise me.
So, I think in particular, Marriott has been poor at enforcing franchise consistency, and I think that's going to bite them. But I'm going to ask you, Miriam, a question, and it's really the opposite. What can the hotel industry learn from the vacation rental industry?
I think it goes to piggyback off what he's saying, just having that more staff, that resource, just putting more bodies at front desk. I mean, when you call a vacation rental, there's multiple people that you're going to speak to. When you go to a hotel, that's that one person that clocked in at 7, they're going to be there till 7 a.m. They're getting all the check-ins, they're getting bombarded. I think it's staffing more efficiently. Look, I think the cleaning could go either way, but I think it's really that front desk, that guest service is what the hotel industry lacks for me.
Well, also, Doug, and I'm sure you talk about this in your seminars, your speeches, your conferences. It's about meeting expectations. So if you provide standards and you provide a promise to the guests, then there's an expectation that they're going to get that. So if you tell the guest, hey, there's housekeeping, hey, there's a pool, a fitness center, a reception desk, a restaurant, and they show up and the restaurant's shut down, which has happened not just recently, multiple hotels, the restaurant was shut down, quote unquote, for staffing issues. Housekeeping, they don't even sometimes tell you there won't be housekeeping. And the worst part is, even if you're just there for, 2 or 3 days, you have to go down there to get coffee. They're not even, proactive with bringing coffee pads or extra towels, which would be the 2 things you would want. But talk about that, Doug, where I think the hotels have really shot themselves in the foot, and vacation rental people need to, make sure they follow suit, that whatever you promise the guest, you provide them.
Absolutely. And, to your point, that's why I carry instant coffee packets as a backup in case I forget to go down there or they don't give enough. But, I do want to point out there are, first of all, good operators and bad operators in these franchise companies. So McNeil Hotels, they run Marriott. Well, actually, they have a lot, I think mostly Hilton product. But there's people who run very good Marriott product or, Hilton product. I do think the brands could be more strict with their standards. Drury hotels, my son got married, we booked a Drury, family-owned chain. There is a Mr. Drury, second generation running it. We had a wedding block. He got married in a small suburb outside of St. Louis. There wasn't a lot of other luxury or upscale hotels, so we picked our first time at Drury. Plenty of staff, amazing breakfast. Rooms were clean every day. We had to, the housekeeper looked disappointed when we turned down our cleaning because we were getting ready for the wedding. But vacation rentals, as you probably see me say a lot at conferences, there's a fork in the road. There are those that are realizing, it's a people business still. There's the other ones that make it a people-less business, and they are, outsourcing, cutting, thinking that tech is the winner. So I do, we can't sum up either industry, but you got to have the needs. And I think when you said that question, it's not really just enough to meet expectation. Have you ever seen a review that they said, hey, I went there, it was pretty good? You got to exceed it if you want it back.
So what do you think realistically is the biggest difference, with the expectation of guests checking into a vacation rental to checking into a hotel? because there is a big difference. I mean, I go check into a hotel, I'm going to be the same regardless if it's clean, dirty. Same with a cabin, whatever condo. But guests are much more compliant if they check into a hotel and there's a little disarray than they are expectation wise for a overnight rental.
Yeah, I do believe you're going to get more complaints at a brand because they come to expect it. But you've seen this. I mean, as long as I've been in this business, which is a very long time, all the surveys, what do guests actually value most across the board? Always cleanliness and also security, depending on how the surveys are worded, safety and security and cleanliness. You've got to meet, that's the fundamental need, and then of course it's comfort and all these other things. I always believe, expectation is situational. One of my famous quotes that I'm famous for in the hotel side is the Motel 6 is someone's Ritz-Carlton. So I have a client down in South Padre Island. Their rates are very low. Their average guest is, maybe the first rung on middle class. They're coming for 3 nights. They're renting a basic condo. To them, that is, your most luxurious Park City, some very wealthy person renting a 10 grand a week or maybe 10 grand a night booking. So it is always situational, but I do think the safety in a hotel is key in an urban location, but across the board cleanliness.
Well, I wanted to talk about another subject, which you were at the VRMA International, and I know you talked to a lot of property managers there. So clearly 2023, at least for the US market, was very disappointing for revenue. Occupied nights were down, ADR in most markets were down. And I think because of macro world events, people are not overly optimistic now about 2024.
Yeah.
And what do you say when you're talking to these people who many of them you've known for years, or in my case, decades? What are you telling these people where they're concerned now because their labor costs have not gone down, but their revenue has?
If I did one call, one email, one textual message exchange, one in-app conversation at a time, fight. I've been, I started my first company in my 20s in 1989. I've been through ups and downs, the Desert Storm, Desert Shield. I was on a plane 9/11 flying to meet Starwood that morning in New York City, flying in on the morning of 9/11. I lost 2 months of revenue. I mean, business goes and falls, but you must stay on top of it. I know Jeff and Michelle did a great segment last week on the marketing, and I heard some of the comments about people letting off the gas, but we also maybe got a little lazy about service, and maybe we were living off those OTA stream flood that's coming in, where we looking at the phone calls and the emails. How many people message on a Verbo and say, hey, I just have a quick question about how many vehicles can I park? And we got lazy and maybe didn't respond, or we said 2 instead of, hi, I'm Doug with In-House Reservations. We would love to have you. There's 2 spaces. If you need more, hit me up on a DM and I'll help you, So we can look back and think, oh my gosh, there's a recession coming, or there's this and that, but all you can control is what you can control. And every day there is, we do telephone mystery shopping and call scoring. And when we take on new clients, or we offer it as a free assessment, including anyone watching, you might be shocked at how many opportunities you're missing every day through conversations, text, and in-app messaging.
Yeah. So when I was coming up, the big metrics-based system was Navis, which Jeff Robertson and Michelle McKee were both affiliated with. Navis then started to get more and more expensive, probably because they had less competition. We moved over to Pulse, and we still look at some of those key metrics like abandon rate, how many calls you're taking, the amount of ready time. I mean, all of those things. But I'm going to ask Miriam. Miriam, aren't you shocked by how few companies actually look at metrics, actually look at numbers that have just come in the last 5-6 years when everything was easy, and just haven't paid attention to their numbers?
Yeah, it's really surprising. I had a meeting today's Friday, Wednesday, with a couple of local property manager, general managers in this market. They had no idea, as far as what numbers they had, what their stuff was tracking. It's and again, but they came in on that high. When you come in the past couple of years, how it's been now moving forward, that difference. We've been in the industry where it's been the roller coaster. I think that's where you're going to really see when you don't know the numbers, you don't see what your staff is outbounding and inbounding, and that control is hard. Doug's, what you got, Doug?
I got to piggyback on that. And, you're absolutely right. People don't know the numbers, but going back to what Steve says, I can tell you there's clients that have Revenate, Navis, Track, any of the other systems that are out there. They're still not even paying attention, because there's so many distractions. And, when COVID first hit and all of a sudden this surge came to vacation rental, if you paid attention to my articles and blogs and when I was guest on other podcasts, it was all about when those displaced travelers, because they're going to go back next year on the cruise. They're going to go back. If you saw the numbers this year, top destinations, urban, okay, people going back to New York City, did you see the deals on cruises? I just read yesterday, cruises are nearly sold out for the winter. The travelers are out there spending money. They're just not coming in easy. So, we have to control the things we can control.
Do you think the reason that the Carnival and the cruises are doing so well is they have been doing that extra marketing and approaching and outbounding and all the things where we have gotten lazy and accustomed to having that good year. I think that's a lot of it, is that extra poke.
I think it's a little complacency, but there's another factor. And Steve, I don't know how you feel about this, but the distractions. There's so many, in the VRMA is great conference. All these conferences are fantastic, but you walk down these, the aisles, and I see you in the floor a lot. You're talking to everybody, but at some point there's, how many apps do you need? How many platforms do you need? Are these really helping our businesses, or are they distracting us from the things that are the most important?
Well, from my standpoint, and I make the vendor hall, and I think suppliers have mixed feelings for V-Trips because we've purchased 11 companies in the past, since 2021, and what we did over the last 2 years was simplify and compress our tech stack. And so there's some hurt feelings with some of the vendor communities why we picked one vendor over another. I mean, case in point, Home 247 is our smart lock company. We've worked with them from day one. And yes, there's other very good systems out there, but as an enterprise company, we're not going to be managing 5 different lock systems. And same with property management system. We're with Track TNS. However, and so that's one of the things which I don't understand from kind of this newbie generation, or whatever they're being called, fresh faces, I think is what they're called, that come in and they mistake that these vendors are their friends, as opposed to that they're a resource, and they're not a friend just because they take you out for dinner. Why? They're salespeople.
Some nice parties.
A nice party.
I was joking at our boot camp that we did. We had about 75 people, about 60% of which, based on a show of hands, were their first VRMA conference. I can think of about 5 faces in the room that were about the size when I met you, Steve, in I think 2007, and I pretty much said that. I said, talk to everybody, but I said, you're going to find they're all saying, oh, only $1 a unit, or only a couple of bucks a night, and all these different things. But talk to them all. And again, there's some great tech out there, but we get to the point, same thing in hotels, where it's data overload, it's app overload. And that's one of the problems the brand has, is trying, I don't want to segue too far here, but you look at, well, I don't want to get into that if you want to ask questions about it, but all the tech hotels have embraced, spent a ton of money on, that guests still don't use. So at the end of the day, you do want to stay on top of it. I am not anti-tech, but don't forget the people part. You have a Track Pulse, Navis, Send Squared, Ring Central recording your calls. Listen to them before you buy a new app.
Well, my favorite example, and I'm going to get to Miriam in a second, in the vendor hall is some of these vendors who I think are great salespeople that are talking about guest books. And I'm thinking, okay, I don't know who they're selling a guest book to. We have a guest portal. And the most important thing in that guest portal that we're trying to maneuver and manage is payment, like the guest payment and making sure that the guests can update and pay for the rest of their information and then get their lock code and other important information. We tried way back with Glad to Have You to kind of do, these guest books. And, the internet is pretty powerful. There's all the information you could ever want on the internet, and the young people know how to use it. So I just don't understand some of these guest books. But Miriam, help me out here. Are vendors your friend? I mean, am I making a mistake here?
No, listen, I'm honestly to the point in my life where I'm like, don't take me to dinner, send me a sweatshirt or a coffee cup, and I'm good. That's going to get you more attention from me because then I'm going to remember it. But I think a lot of companies, especially, new companies coming on, they drink the Kool-Aid. They go sit, they have these conversations, and they subscribe. And within a year to 2 years, they're extremely invested and spend all this money on things that's realistically not going to help them. Like, at the end of the day, keep it simple. What are we in this business to do? Making memories and making sure that guests have a great stay. And that takes one-on-one communication a lot of times. Instead of all the techie crap, I don't even get it. Again, send me a sweatshirt. It's going to get you better farther with me.
And there is some good tech. I don't think any of us are, anti-tech, and we certainly realize that. But this whole idea that, young people are good and love tech and hate people and older people. My older brother, Dan, he's 70 years old. I will put him up against any 25-year-old when it comes to tech. I mean, this guy got the first computer, probably built a Commodore, But at the end of the day, you just look at how many pre-arrival emails you get and then how many post-departure emails you get. It really hit with me when Kathy and I went to Hawaii and we went to 3 different islands. And then you have 3 different stays. Now multiply that by how many different emails you get.
Well, there definitely is something to be said about, picking and choosing your scheduling of emails and customer communication, because consumers will drown out information if you send too many of them. So I'm sure that's something you teach as you are talking to some of these clients about what are you trying to do, what's your goal, which normally it's revenue, it's not branding, and then what is the best way to get there, and obviously it's segmentation, and it's creating a promotional calendar, and it's really focusing in on each of these segments in terms of when is the best conversion and what's the best conversion metric. And Doug, I looked at a lot of the topics at VRMA, and I mean, some of the basic information just wasn't there, like conversion. How do you improve conversion? And I was shocked by that.
Yeah, conversion. I ask people all the time, what is your conversion? Now, let's talk about something, an easy metric. Now, some people don't measure it at all. Take an Excel sheet and make a form. Now, some people measure it with Track or, Revenate or Send Squared. I don't want to disrespect the other providers in this space. But the thing is, I can think of one specific client. They tell me, their conversion is 80%. The owner had not even looked at it. We looked at it. Almost every call was coded as a no sale or an inquiry only. Our team actually started a new service. We listen to and score and download calls from all the recording platforms, but we started a coding compliance. And, you buy an hourly 30-minute or an hour block, and we go and listen to calls and see people are coding a lot of inquiries as no sales or information only. And that 80% conversion is probably more like 25. So conversion for sure. Another big metric people don't look at is average revenue per booking. That's one of my first questions is, what is your average revenue per booking? And people say, oh, well, it's hard, because we're busy in the summer, we're busy in the winter, and rates are higher. Just take your total revenue divided by total bookings, and then you know how much every phone call is worth. And then ask yourself, is it worth measuring? I had a client years ago, the Butch Stewart, the founder of Sandals and Beaches. He refused to call it conversion. He called it a conversion rate. So a call center might say, oh, our conversion. Now they look at raw total calls to bookings. We have a good conversion of 45%. Mr. Stewart said, no, you have a lost booking rate of 55%, a lost call rate. That's the mentality we need.
That's me. Listen, I think you should test us, Doug.
Let's
You need
do
to
it.
call.
Let's do a virtual fist bump for that one.
No, I'm that person. I mean,
Don't-
listen, we done it at SmokyMountains.com. I would listen to our team's calls and they're like, we closed 30% today. Okay, what happened to the 70% that we let go? Where were we at on that?
That's how you beat the previous year in a down market.
Yeah.
And I see this again and again and again, like I said, throughout the history of the lodging and the ups and downs that go there. I'm sure you talked to some this year. There's companies that had a fantastic 2023 because they're having
Well,
that.
I mean, we've talked to people in the industry and it's mixed. Some people had a decent 2023. 2022, obviously, for most companies was much better. And in some cases, depending on the markets, particularly the non-ski markets, 2023 was really tough. There were a lot of headwinds for companies in this space. Because there was effectively a rotation away from leisure resort markets towards urban cruises and even international travel due to the strength of the dollar. So, here's the point. I mean, we're going into 2024 and I'm not sure how many of your customers or clients have budgets, but I mean, one of the things that you've got to be talking to your clients about is, these call center seats are expensive, right? So at this point, my guess is if you're taking a look at labor costs, most of these companies, the cost of their call centers have increased 30, 40, even 50% since 2019, just because of labor shortage and just the fact that some people just removed themselves from the job market. And yet they're not even looking at some of these people in terms of their true conversion. And worse, in some cases, they're not even set up to do that, right? I mean, we took over companies and they were a lot of generalists as opposed to specialists. And it's almost impossible to kind of take a look at their true conversion if they're being pulled in a lot of different directions. So what do you tell these clients who are coming to you and going, I'm really concerned, Doug, my revenue's down and my costs are up?
Well, yeah, you touched on a lot there. The labor market. And by the way, I do get it that there's some markets you're never going to beat your previous year. But the thing is, actualize whatever potential is left. There's always those outliers, but specifically to call centers, what has happened in the hotel side is a lot of companies and brands have devalued voice. They fall into this millennial myth that, young people never want to call, whereas I think it's more situational. People will call if it's an important enough trip. The more emotionally engaged they are in the travel, the more likely they are to call. So the truth is, in call centers and hotels have devolved. Have you called a Marriott, Steve, to book? I know you probably book online because you're Bonvoy and you have the app.
I hate calling online. I do it only if it's some weird extenuating circumstance.
Say you're bringing your dog, or you're bringing your mom or something, and you need to make a call.
Well, Doug, that's a good thing. There have been hotels where we have called because it's not on their website. It doesn't say if they're pet friendly or non-pet friendly. So we made a call to the Coronado.
Or you need a connecting room, or you're not Steve Milo, you're someone that doesn't travel that much. And the first thing Marriott does when they answer is say, thank you for calling Marriott. Did you know the best way to book a Marriott hotel is at Marriott.com? We can text you the link. Duh. Where did you get the phone number from? You got it from Marriott.com. So they need to pay more attention. Now, I'm not sure if your question was about the outsourcing of it or doing reservations in-house relative to labor costs.
Well, Doug, I mean, I think it's a more basic situation. So when again, first thing is generalist versus specialist, almost impossible to evaluate. And some people are meant to be reservationists. Some people are better off if they're, operations. Second, the people, if they are really in charge of sales, well, you want to obviously take a look at their conversion, but you also want to have a bonus program that compensates them based on the objectives. Third, you've also got to track those people if they're, doing customer service or service order. You still have to track them. I mean, there is an opportunity to manage reductions of quote unquote headcount by just taking a look at some of your lower performers. But if you don't know who your lower performers are, you can't do it.
Absolutely. And many operations are overstaffed. And also you think about, at those moments of everything happens at once moments, have overflow, and again, it depends on the size of the company. You acquired some very large companies, you acquired a few smaller ones, but cross training, and there should be a time. We have many clients that I just talked to one recently we're going to be picking up, and they actually have everyone cross trained. We have several like that when the phone is overflowing, everyone answers, but you really have to manage it because there is a lot of downtime, there is a lot of wasted time. We do say phone calls here, but let's also talk about what I call platform messages, where people, especially Airbnb, they're going to message you with questions. Verbo, they may send you questions. Expedia, they may book and then send a question, but they can still cancel. Email coming in, chat, there's we call it textual selling, anything in the written world. So you have to manage all this. And, if you're a smaller operation, you can go and look at your chat log and you can just sit in the room and you can have manual forms. But if you are a substantial operation, you need the right tech to do that. And it's worth investing in. That comes back to, Steve, the average revenue per booking. Because if you know what that average revenue per booking is, you start to think every phone call and text, we have a saying, ring, ring means cha-ching. And we start off with thinking about, what is that average revenue per booking or email inquiry?
Well, a lot to unpack there. I will say, probably one of the things that you go in and consult with clients is, do they have a phone tree? What is the rollover? When are the days of the heaviest calls? I mean, I'm shocked by the number of companies we acquired who never looked at any of that, right? So
they don't even know.
It's really, really difficult when you're not looking at numbers to basically, kind of do some things where you can get some tweaks and get some reduction. Because right now, the one thing you're not going to be able to reduce is the cost per hour, right? So what you are going to be able to reduce are ineffective or marginally effective employees, right? So you keep the people that are really, they're great, and then you phase out the ones who aren't so good. But you can't do that if you have metrics. So Miriam, I'm going to ask you, because you've come into the office and people are just hanging out, maybe not so much right now, but doesn't it drive you crazy when you see people just hanging out, not doing anything, not outbounding? I mean, doesn't that drive you crazy?
It's one of my pet peeves. I'll go to Doug. I think that the cross training is huge. If I walk in the office, it's not so much now, but before I'd lose my mind. I'm like, what are you doing? Everyone, and I think that's where you'll see a lot of brands, not even companies, whatever you want to call them, they do well when you can put any person in a position and they can do that task or that job. It matters. And so I think it goes back to cross training, whether you're outbounding, you're taking calls, you're doing guest calls, and someone walks up to the front desk. Everybody should be picking up. There shouldn't have to go through a tree of 14 people or sitting on hold. Like 3 minutes, I'm done. I mean, I'm that way. I called Marriott in Nashville yesterday. I was on hold for 7 minutes. I mean, I was done. After 3 minutes, I'm
Yeah.
walking around this office. I've done this, and it was for my dog. I have big dogs.
There you
And
go.
so
You had to call.
I had to call and like, hey,
Situation.
yeah, I have 2 horses, 60-pound girls, like they're coming. Like, let's, but by the time that I was able to talk to someone and ask one question, 17 and a half minutes.
No.
Yeah. I mean, that's ridiculous. But, and so here's what I done. I pulled our call log at the office because I'm like, okay, if one question, how long? And look, some of our calls in and out. We had a call yesterday that was 23 minutes. For what? So I listened to it. They had 2 questions. Again, that's not acceptable, guys. And so it all goes back to what are we doing? Who could have picked up that phone call and took care of it? So yeah, I don't do well when I walk in and people are just hanging out. I'm like, what are we doing? So
Well, I think the bottom line that Doug and Miriam are both saying is, one, you've got to look at your numbers, your call logs. If you don't have a phone tree, you need to get one. You need to audit the calls themselves, take a look at the conversion, take a look at if people on your sales staff are not outbounding, that should be changed immediately. I mean, that's for sure low-hanging fruit. So Doug, because we're wrapping things up now, is there 1 or 2 tips that you would give property managers right now as we face a very, very difficult 2024?
Well, I think it comes back to where we started out this conversation, tune out all of the noise and don't be self-defeating, and, focus on what you can do. And that's to, all the things Jeff and Michelle talked about last week, and your other guests have talked about with the marketing and the outbound and your email campaigns and social. I know there was a lot of talk last week about social presence and all those things. And then also pay attention to every touch point. You think back to when you started, Steve. I remember when you had the little storefront shop up in Jacksonville, you had a nice website, but there was maybe a few pictures of every place, and people had a lot of questions. And then probably I'm sure, Miriam, you probably remember that everybody maybe checked into a cabin at a desk and they got information. The touch points have been reduced, so therefore each touch point is that much more important. And that's from this for 2024 to revenue. That is every email, every in-app message, every chat, and then on when you have extra time, call up. I was at one of the panels, and they were talking about, again, the tech versus the human part. And there was 3 companies. The first 2 had about 50, 60 properties. Melanie Durham from Mill Pond was asked about, what is she doing? Her people call all the guests, who booked online, just to and then they turned over to Ed Bray from Beach Properties. He has over 400. And they said, well, I know that's certainly not scalable for a company of your size. He said, well, we try. So they still call guests who booked online. And so if you have that downtime, Miriam, right?
yeah,
I like that outbounding, and so focus on the marketing, what you can do, and then remember how much it costs to make that phone ring, or to make that email inquiry come in, or all of your distribution costs, not just commissions, but all the money you spend to put everything online when someone sends you a message. And focus on lost call rate, lost opportunity rate, not sitting back and congratulating yourself because someone is handing you a report that says you're converting 80%.
Miriam, any last tip from you?
yeah. I think 2024 is going to go back to the personal touch. I think that where we as property managers have to be more hands-on with the guests at this point. I mean, look, when you go on these cruises, they put the little piece of chocolate on the pillow. They make and people love it. They share that crap all over TikTok and social media because that's what they want. I think for us we had this conversation yesterday, like with Thanksgiving that's coming up, we're going to put some extra features in all these properties. I think the personal touch is what people are actually wanting right now. It's not so much of the hands off. So going back to the basics.
All right. There we go. And my tip is going to be, the 48 hours where the customer connects with you, that's the critical time. So whether it's your website, you have an abandoned cart email, or if you're tracking that, you're getting back to them, or they call and you call score, and you should be doing outbounding. I mean, your staff, there's no legitimate reason not to be doing outbounding back to those high converting customers. But that's your best chance. Your highest conversion is those customers that are actively looking, because they tend to book pretty quick. So they're shopping, they're looking, they're getting close to booking. They're gonna just check with all the family members. You need to proactively reach back out to them and touch them. Any rate, this has been a great edition of Straightfire VR. You can reach us as always on our website, straightfirevr.com, or at Gmail, straightfirevr@gmail.com. Thank you, Doug. Thank you, Miriam, for another great episode.